Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's lecture in public speaking class, where we're going to answer the question, what are the key elements of impromptu speaking? This is a fairly brief lecture, but we're now transitioning from the part of the class where we're doing the academic learning to the part of the class where we're going to be doing the actual performing in class. So this is the beginning of that transition. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about our key definitions, and there are two definitions you need to know when it comes to impromptu speaking. The first is the definition of impromptu itself, which basically means made or done without previous preparation. If you're doing something impromptu, you have not prepared for it in advance. And the other term we want you to know is extemporaneous, which means done, spoken, or performed with little advanced preparation. There is a distinction between impromptu speaking and extemporaneous speaking when it comes to formal speech and debate, and I will talk about that a little bit later. These words are synonyms, but in speech and debate, like I just said, they can mean two different kinds of speeches. Long story short, an impromptu speech, you have a very short period of time to prepare for it, and the speech itself is shorter. An extemporaneous speech, you have a half an hour to prepare for the speech, but then you must give it without notes. And as you can see, there's not a lot of advanced preparation for either one, so the notion here is that neither one of these speeches is scripted. And they basically require you to think on your feet and create speeches as you go. The whole idea here is that ability to think and be creative on your feet, which is a great skill to have when you have job interviews. In teaching, we like to call this inventing the plane while we fly it. That means sometimes you just wing it, or you take a moment and you go with it. And impromptu speaking forces you to do that. So what are the differences? In an impromptu speech, you are going to choose a topic from a given list. You're going to have 30 seconds to make that choice. And in class, we're going to give you 2 minutes to prepare for the speech. You will need to give a 1-minute speech. It's going to have a grabber at the beginning and a clincher at the end. And there has to be some meat to the speech. In other words, there have to be some facts and details in between the grabber and the clincher. And during the entire speech, your goal is to stay on topic. In an extemporaneous speech, you will also choose from a topic list. However, you will have 6 minutes to prepare instead of 2 minutes. It should have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, so it should have much more structure to it. It has to be a minimum of 2 minutes. It has to have solid content and organization, and you have to make it seem as though it's prepared. Now, these are the standards in class that I will hold you to when you give speeches in class. I will talk to you about the difference between what we're doing in class and what would be expected of you if you were doing a formal speech and debate presentation at the end of this lecture. So, what will preparing for your impromptu speech look like? Well, the first thing is you're going to be giving a list of topics in the hall. So you will choose your topics when you're in the hall, and then you will have 5 minutes to prepare your speech. In class, we will allow a note card. The very first thing you want to do is choose a grabber and write it down. And you want to write down a few main points of emphasis. In other words, what is the meat of your speech? And then you're going to want to choose and write down a clincher. And you only have 5 minutes to do all of that. We will then invite you to come into class, and you will present your speech, and you will have 1 minute to present your speech. You will need to stay on topic the entire time. You want to focus on those 9 elements of effective delivery that we learned in our lecture a couple of weeks ago. And when you get to the 1 minute point, you want to unleash your clincher and call it an impromptu speech. What types of grabbers do you want to use in your impromptu speech? Well, in an impromptu speech, you're going to want to keep your grammars basic, and that will be most effective for you. So you want to use your personal reference, your interesting fact, or your quotation. The more advanced grabbers take more time to prepare for and more time to practice, and you're not going to have that time. So you want to kind of make it snappy and do the ones that are simple. So if you can do it as a personal reference, that's great. If you can do it as an interesting fact, that's great. If you have a quotation that you've already memorized and you want to go with that, by all means, please do. But you want to keep your grabbers simple because you're not going to have a lot of time to think it through and prepare. So don't overthink it. Just figure out, how do I invite the listener into the speech I'm about to give? And then when it comes to what types of clinchers you should use, you remember they should be simple as well. So for an impromptu speech, keeping your clinchers basic is also most effective. So your two basic clinchers are residual message and call to action. So that residual message is basically restating the thesis of your speech, but adding something a little extra to it based on the fact you've already given the speech. So should not be exactly the same. And then, of course, the call to action is always effective because you're telling the audience what you want them to do after hearing your speech. Makes it a little more motivational, could be more effective. It's up to you, and it's based on what the content of your speech is. So, if we were talking about the difference between what we're going to be doing in class and actual speech and debate, you might find this to be interesting. In our in-class impromptu speech, you're going to choose a topic from a given list. You will have 30 seconds to choose. You will have 2 minutes to prepare. You will be allowed a note card, and the speech only needs to be 1 minute long. If you were doing it for OSAA speech and debate, you would choose from a list of 3 choices. You would have only 10 to 30 seconds to choose, and then you would have only 30 seconds to prepare your speech, and you're not allowed a note card. It's pretty much plug, play, and go. And your speech can and should be as long as 5 minutes. Now, I will tell you right now, not everybody gets to that length of time, but the expectations in speech and debate are actually more intensive than what we're asking you to do in class. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is our brief introduction to impromptu speaking. We are going to do some practicing in class before I actually ask you to do this. But it's getting time for me to stop talking and for you to start talking.